Welcome friends to this 13th lecture on the series on human behavior. Now the course as I had explained in many previous lectures is looking at how to study human behavior. So the basic of human behavior or the study of human behavior can only be done through the science of psychology. And so what I have done up till now, the past 12 lectures, is make you aware with the science of psychology, the very basic concepts and the very basic methodologies which psychology uses to study human behavior. Now let me try to link all these material that we have done up till now in the past 12 lectures into how does it actually help in studying human behavior. So we will take a quick look back onto what we have done up till now, and we will introduce a new topic, a very interesting topic today, which is again one of the basics of studying human behavior. So we started off our discussion by looking at the basics of the science of psychology. Before we start using any science to study human behavior, we should know its basic, we should know its concepts. So what I explained to you in terms of what is behavior is that behavior is a reaction, and we had a good discussion in the first lecture of why we should be studying human behavior and what is human behavior for that matter. So we started off by looking at the basics of the science of psychology. We started out defining the historical roots of what psychology is, defining psychology in itself, and looking at the other schools of psychology, the various viewpoints of psychology which is used to study human behavior. Then at the end of this, we introduced to you some of the methodologies that we use in studying human behavior. So we introduced the idea of experimentation, the idea of correlation, the idea of observation, and so many other ideas, the methodologies of studying psychology. So once we were equipped with this science, we started into the journey of studying human behavior. Now every behavior starts with a stimulus or starts with an event, an external event. Now behaviors of course can also be generated because of internal events, but since the study of psychology mostly concerns with external, or a good way to study psychology is to look at external events. So in the next set of lectures, we started looking at those apparatus, those processes and structures that humans have for encoding the physical stimulus, the physical world in the psychological realm. And there we did some work on sensation, defining what sensation is, the parameters of any sensory system, for example sensitivity and sensory coding. Sensory coding is the process through which sensory stimuluses are encoded. Then we looked at how human beings detect signals from the noisy environment that is external to it and that is internal to it. So two kind of noisy environments, external environment or the physical environment outside of human beings are always noisy, and in fact the human brain also creates a lot of noise. So we looked at the idea of signal detection theory, and after that we introduced a model system which is the eye, and looked at how this model system functions in terms of sensory process. Now once in understanding human behavior, once we have detected or once we have witnessed an external event, this leads to us interpreting this event in the psychological domain, and that is where the idea of perception came in. And so in perception we looked at how the perceptual process really functions. Now perception is making meaning to what the sensory systems are delivering to us, and so we looked at perceptual systems, we looked at two viewpoints of the perceptual system, two models of the perceptual system, and we further looked at the 5 stages of perception, starting from attention to localization to recognition, then abstraction and constancies. These processes actually help you in making meaning of any external stimuluses which are coming to you through the sensory system. Once we know that a certain event has happened in the external environment and we are able to encode and make meaning out of it through the perceptual processes, we learn something from it, right. So, why do we learn, or why do we keep these external stimuluses or this external information within us, so that at a later point of time when we encounter these stimuluses or certain situations, we do not have to work over for generating the appropriate response. And so, for doing that, a process which is called learning is required. And so, then we started looking at what is learning. So, we started off by defining two basic forms of learning, the first form being the non-associative form and the other form being the associative form. So, we looked at simple learnings, which is learning like habituation and sensitization, reflex learning, where one item or one event leads you to learning. Then we looked at the associative forms of learning, which is associating many stimuluses or stimulus response, and based on that acquiring knowledge. So, we looked at classical conditioning, we looked at instrumental conditioning, and we looked at observation learning. So, this is basically the different kind of learning that we looked at, and that we did in the chapter on learning and conditioning. Now, once we have learned something, once we have gained knowledge from whatever perceptual interpretation the perceptual system has made, and this knowledge has been learned or this knowledge has been acquired, they need to be stored somewhere, and that is where we started dealing with the idea of memory. Memory is a system which not only encodes information, but it stores, and it also helps us in recalling this information at a later point of time to decide which is the best response to a particular event, stimulus or situation. Memory, then we looked at the idea of memory from two influential viewpoints of the Atkinson-Schriffen and the neural network model, and there we also focused on the idea of what is long term memory, what is working memory, and how does long term memory and working memory they talk to each other, what kind of information can be stored in working memory and in the long term memory, and what kind of memory systems are there. For example, we have the declarative and the procedural system, one system which we can access, the other system which we cannot access, and so different kind of memories or different kind of stores and different kind of information which is stored. And we also looked at several factors which decide how information will be stored, which information will be stored, how it will be forgotten, where it will be forgotten, and that kind of thing. Now, once we store the information which is learned in our memory systems, in our human brain, we need to exchange this system or exchange this information between people, because one of the ways that's where we divided between memory and higher cognition. So, memory is a lower cognition process, it's sometimes considered a higher cognitive process. So, we separated from there in our lecture series. So, then we started looking at higher cognitive processes. So, once we have information within us in memory, we need to express this information or we need to communicate this information through our behavior. And so, one is non-verbal, the other is verbal. So, basically when two beings talk to each other, a person behaves in a certain manner, he communicates certain ideas. And so, we looked at the next section looks at what is communication and what is language. So, we focused on the idea of what is language, and so we focused on written language, we focused on the difference between communication and language, and then focused on the basic idea of the English language. So, what it comprises of and that kind of a thing. So, we looked at what is the basic speech sound and then how these form to combine together to form the word, and then from there the sentences and how it is communicated, sentences are communicated, and how is meaning generated, and whether language is innate or is it learned, and can animals also learn language. So, that's what we did. And further to that, once we have language, this language actually represents information. So, how is this information stored? Also, whenever we have some information within us or processed by the brain, we need to act on this information, and one of the ways in which we act is something called thinking. So, we then looked at something called thought process of what is thinking, and so we looked at two basic type of thinking, language of the mind or language of the thought, the propositional thought and the idea of the imaginal thought, and that is what we did in the last lecture. We looked at what is propositional thought, what is imaginal thought. Within the propositional thought, we looked at what are concepts, because concepts define propositional thoughts, and what is the process of classification. Then we looked at what is reasoning. So, reasoning is how we think. So, thinking involves some kind of a reasoning. So, many arguments and a conclusion, when these come together and when we start thinking on them, or we start reasoning why a certain event, we start giving reason to why certain events happen, or we start thinking about when we should act in a certain way and when we should not act in a certain way. The very process of thinking involves reasoning. So, we looked at deductive reasoning and we looked at the idea of inductive reasoning. Then we moved on to the idea of imaginal thought, how not only the propositional thought, but the imaginal thought also helps us in thinking. And further to it, we looked at the idea of problem solving, because once we have language and once we have thought process, this thought process is employed or it is used to solve problems. What is problem? A problem is basically a situation which you cannot solve. So, human beings behave and they do not behave in a very mechanistic manner. They think before behaving. So, human beings behave in certain manner and they learn that some behaviors will reward and some behaviors may not reward. But if a situation like a previous situation occurs, but it is not similar to the previous situation in some ways, human beings need to think and solve a problem into how we should be behaving in certain ways, or what kind of behavior we will be showing to certain stimuli, whether it is in the external world or the internal world, and solve problems which the environment presents to us. So, this is what we did up till now. Another interesting thing that we are going to do today is something called intelligence. Now, this is a very important psychological ability and it has been much talked about. So, before we start, let us look at what is intelligence, and what we will do in today's lecture is I will try and explain to you what is intelligence and look at some of the basic theories, and maybe then afterwards what I will do is I will introduce to you how intelligence is measured and take up a model system which is emotional intelligence and explain to you what it is all about. So, let us start with a story. When I used to go to school, I had a friend who was very intelligent and he used to beat me in everything. I used to call him super intelligent XYZ. I will not name him because there is no way to it is not good to name someone, right. And so, this person who was working with me or who was in my class used to be brilliant. No, be it academics, be it sports, be it anything, he would beat me, and I would wonder, and I would wonder, or friends of mine would wonder, how is it that he is able to beat me in so many things? Look at anything, good in marks, good in sports, teacher's favorite, parents favorite, and all kind of things. So, he is good with everything, right. And I used to wonder always that this person would be the best from my school, and he would do good in life, and someday he will be the most intelligent person, because we would call him the brainiac or the most intelligent person. So, intelligentsia is what we would call him. Now, years had passed, and so I started doing what I did. I finished my doctorate degree, postdoctoral degree, and then joined my job. And years after, like 3 or 4 summers before, I went to my hometown from where I belong, and I suddenly or out of some curiosity, not even actually curiosity, I was doing some shopping. So, I went into a mall. And in this mall, I saw a shoe store, which was a very good shoe store, and unfortunately, I liked a particular pair of shoes, revealing that, right. So, I am not a shopper that way, but then I like this pair of shoes, and I decided that I will buy this pair of shoes. And so, I went into the shoe store, and suddenly I saw the shoe clerk, and he vaguely seemed to be familiar to me. I did not remember him after so many years, but he remembered me, and he said, "Oh, you are so and so, I am so and so, we used to study." And it was like a shock to me. This is the same person I studied with, and so here is what is he doing in a shoe shop. I always thought that he was so brilliant, he would go become a professor somewhere, maybe Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, no matter where. Very good in academics, very good in everything. And so, I thought that he would do good things in life, he would become very popular in life, and so he was not doing anything. He was in a shoe store. Now, when I talked to him, I quickly understood where the problem was. Although he was very intelligent, what was happening is the conversation that we were happening is it was not stable. This person was jumping from one conversation to another conversation, jumping between ideas, not comprehending thoughts, had its own mind, had its own thought process, and so he was not able to contemplate anything. He was not able to focus on anything. And so when I took this shoe from the shop and I went out, I went out cursing myself, telling myself that, look, what has happened to intelligence? This person was the most intelligent person. And so this story actually tells you what intelligence is all about. Intelligence is not something which guarantees you success and achievement in life. Intelligence is a property. So by the definition of it, or by the idea that you have intelligence, you do not get guaranteed that you will be a success. And so many intelligent persons are known to be failures in their life. Look at Albert Einstein, look at Sigmund Freud, look at any person for that matter. They have been highly intelligent in life. Similar to this, there is a story of Theodore Woodrow Wilson, who had been the 28th president of the United States, and he started off as being the most intelligent person in his town. And so later on, he joined, he got very bad grades, he passed out somehow, he joined Princeton, and from there he became what he became. So he became a very popular writer first, and then won the election, and within the World War I, he took America to its success. So these are two stories basically actually tell you that intelligence is not something, a property which you are born with first of all, and then even if you are intelligent, it guarantees you no success in life. It doesn't guarantee you that you will be highly successful. So let's look at the definition of what intelligence is, and let's start the psychological interpretation. Now, how it is related to studying human behavior, because one of the things in human behavior is always talked about, we have talked about, is intelligence. So let's look at what is intelligence, and how to study intelligence, and what role should we think intelligence has in terms of defining human behavior. So first, let's start with the definition of what intelligence is, and as I have some very nice frames here which will talk you about intelligence. Let's look at this. Now, there is this small kid who actually gets a F in his exam, and he says that I blame it on intelligence failure. So he says that, see, it's not me who's failing, it's basically my intelligence. And so what he means is that it comes out of heredity, and so the father is stupid, and so he's stupid, and it's nothing to do with him. It's nothing to do with the fact that he actually didn't study for the exam. Look at the other one. It's Calvin and Hobbes, from Calvin and Hobbes. And so if you look at it, it's very interesting. It seems that, so Calvin says to Hobbes that sometimes I think the surest sign that intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe is that none of it has ever tried to contact us. And so this is another very funny way of looking at intelligence. So basically he says that we are unintelligent people, and the very fact that they have not contacted us shows intelligence. And so there are several definitions of it. And then I'll have a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, who says that the man of knowledge must be able not only to love his enemies but also to hate his friends, and that's what is intelligence, the definition of intelligence. So let's quickly look at what intelligence is, the definition of what intelligence is all about. Now, it is said that intelligence, like love, is one of those concepts that are easier to be recognized than to define. Just like love is a feeling that you have, that you can feel, that you are aware of, and that you can express, but that you can never be sure of it. Similarly, intelligence is a property that you can be aware of, that you know that somebody possesses, but then you can never be sure about it. And so there is no correct definition of intelligence. There is no way to actually define what is intelligent and what is unintelligent, which system is intelligent and which system is not intelligent. And let's look at why is this problem coming. So some reasons why intelligence cannot be easily defined is with certainty are. So one of the reasons is that defining intelligence is difficult, as there are many different definitions. So what we'll do is we'll look at some of the definitions of intelligence. So there have been a number of psychologists, number of people who have defined intelligence in different ways. For example, the earliest definition of intelligence comes from Galton, who actually used the idea of Charles Darwin, and so he defined intelligence as a property which is possessed by people. So some people are superior, born superior. And he believed that doctors, engineers, they come from families who are superior than other families who are inferior. So accountants and clerks are not born in superior family. And so when he did his testing, and so he believed that intelligence is in terms of how much the length of your head is, or how much your perceptual ability is, or how quickly visual acuity is, how quickly your response time is. And so he believes that these are the definitions of intelligence, but that's stupid to look at. And so when he did his work, where he tested in a London conference around around his time, he tested people, some 1600 people who he believed to be intelligent, and none of the factors that he had any correlation or any kind of gave any kind of result similar to what he predicted. So basically what he predicted was not true. And so one reason why intelligence is difficult to define is that there are many reasons of, or many definitions of intelligence. Now the second definition, or the second reason why intelligence cannot be defined, is that some see intelligence as a label for what intelligence tests measure. So on one hand we have people defining different ways in which intelligence is. On the other hand, some people believe that intelligence is what intelligence tests measure. But then you must be aware that there aren't an intelligence test which actually measures everything, the whole intelligence of yours. People might be intelligent in academics, and so they will be stupid in some other field. People might be intelligent in social connection, in social world, and they might be unintelligent in academics. People will be highly creative, so they will be intelligent in creativity and maybe stupid in some other things. And so there are several definitions. And so the idea that intelligence test is what is intelligent is wrong, because there are different kind of intelligence tests. You have an academic intelligence test, you have a intelligence test which measures your emotionality, there are spiritual intelligence tests, and so on and so forth. So if what is intelligence is defined by intelligence test, the definition is wrong. And then some take a broader view that intelligence involves the ability to learn from experience, think in abstract terms, and deal effectively with one's environment. And this is the most suitable view of intelligence. And what it says is that intelligence involves the ability to learn from experience. Intelligent are those people who actually learn from the experience, who actually have the ability to see where they have committed a mistake in their past and learn from them, and use something called observation learning. So they observe their own behavior and see that which is not recorded or which is not rewarded, and the one which is rewarded, and selects the most optimal behavior for any event or situation. Similarly, these people are also able to think in abstract terms. These people can think in abstract terms, can think in abstract ways, can create abstract meanings. They can tolerate the idea of uncertainty. Right? They can think in terms of things which don't exist, and so they can do that kind of a thinking, out of the box kind of a thinking, and they can deal effectively with one's environment. And so one of the other things is that whenever an environment changes or some environment near them changes, they are able to effectively deal with it. So once you change an environment from one environment to another, for example moving from school to college or moving from college to job, when you change these environments or moving out of house to the school, when you are doing all this, then a change in environment is there. And so how effectively can you deal with it is what is intelligence. So let's look at a definition of intelligence then. However, for the purpose of clarity, and the definition of intelligence should be held as the term intelligence refers to. So then we have the final definition of intelligence, and what is it? Individuals' ability to understand complex ideas. Intelligence is how quickly can you understand complex ideas. If I give you a complex idea, or if I give you a complex term, if I give you something abstract, a little abstract, can you actually understand that? That is what is intelligence. So can you is it that only you understand simple ideas or deal with simple structures, or can you actually understand complex ideas? Then to adapt effectively to environment, how quickly or how effectively can you deal with environment? For example, if you move from so let's say that I am traveling from or I'm traveling by flight and my flight gets delayed. Normally speaking, I have a very nice office or a very nice home, and so when I'm traveling, I get the chance of visiting an airport which has a lot of sound, and I don't like too much sound. So can I effectively deal with it? Is it that I'll rush to a lounge and sit there in a lounge in a quiet place because I don't like too many people, I don't like too much sound, and so my place is quiet? So can I effectively deal with it is what is intelligence. Can I effectively deal when I move from one environment to the other environment? Also, to learn from experience. How quickly can you learn from experience, or can you learn from experience at all? So whenever something has happened in the past or some event has happened, can you learn from it? So let's say any event ABC has happened, and that has led to several responses, right, in the past. So can I actually learn from it, saying that response 1 was the one which gave me the maximum satisfaction, and then that is the most optimal, and not response 2 and 3, because as I said, human beings give multiple responses to the same stimuli at different points of time. So can I learn to select the best possible response to a particular stimuli? Also, to engage in various forms of reasoning. Can I reason? Another interesting thing in terms of intelligence is, can I reason? Can I reason like why something has happened? Can I reason why 2 plus 2 is 4, and 4 power 4 is 16, and 4 into 4 is also 16, 4 power 2 is always 16, right. So when I, or example, can I reason why harmonic mean and arithmetic mean are two different things, or geometric mean and harmonic mean are two different things? Can I reason that? Can I reason why something happens, why the earth goes round, or that kind of, these are very simple reasoning, but complex reasoning. Can I do that? Can I reason why I don't get the same treatment everywhere? Can I reason that? And that's another interesting thing to look at. And also to overcome obstacles by careful thought. Can I use thinking, propositional and imaginal thought to overcome obstacles? Can I design equations? Can I think of ways, or can I imagine a whole situation in a certain way so that I can move out of obstacles, or not get into obstacles? So if that is what I can do, then it is what is called intelligence, and that is the most premier definition, or the most apt definition, which is given by Neisser. So once we are done with the definition of intelligence, let's move forward to the question that whether intelligence is a unitary or multifaceted. Now there are two group of people. One group of people believe that intelligence is a unitary thing, and there is another group of people who believe that intelligence is a multifaceted thing. Intelligence is just one property or one process and system, is one group of people believe that, and there are other group of people who actually believe that intelligence is a multiple factor thing, or a multiple property system, or a system which has multiple processes into it. So let us look at that first of all. So there are the two views. The single view that intelligence is a single process and a single system process or a single process system rather, is basically what is Spearman's view. And Thurston believes, on the other hand, that many processes actually comprises the idea of what is intelligence. So is it intelligence a unitary characteristics or dimensions along which people vary? The idea is that whether intelligence is just one characteristic on which people vary, or is it that there are multiple dimensions on which people vary. So intelligence could be composed of multiple facts. For example, intelligence is not just word intelligence. Intelligence should be how quickly you speak, how quickly you read, how quickly you solve problems, how effectively you deal with environment. Is that what is intelligence, or intelligence is just one particular thing, saying that if you are intelligent, you will be doing good, you are not intelligent, you will be doing bad? Is that doing good or bad in anything, is that what is intelligence? And so let us look at what these things actually say. So Spearman 1927 believes that performance on any cognitive task depends on a primary general factor G and more specific factors relating to a particular task. Now Spearman's findings stem from the fact that most intelligence tests, although measure different items, they have high correlation among themselves, and this suggests the presence of a single primary factor. So let us look at the idea that intelligence is a single or unitary factor. And so the idea of Spearman. What Spearman believes is there is a single factor which is called G, and this is called the general intelligence. So, what Spearman believes is that this G or general intelligence is what is present in most people, and people have to be compared on basis of this general intelligence. What is this general intelligence? This is something which is present in most people, and the variation of this general intelligence or this system defines if we are stupid or we are intelligent. And so, he believes that intelligence is comprised of one unitary system or one system which is called the general intelligence, and maybe a couple of other systems which are called the subsidiary systems, which are specific factor. For example, this could be the verbal factor of intelligence. So, intelligence is general intelligence, one factor, and we could have a verbal factor and maybe a social factor. So, two more factors are there, and these S1 and S2 comprise with G. So, intelligence is basically G plus S1 plus S2 or maybe just S1, right. Now, how does the idea come that intelligence is just one factor, one system and one process? Now, what Spearman did was he looked at the idea that most intelligence tests, if you take intelligence tests for several things, for example, take academic intelligence test, then take creative intelligence test, then take intelligence test for performance, then take intelligence test for musical ability, and take all these intelligence tests, and if you see the correlation among all the items, you will find that they correlate among themselves very highly. So, many intelligence tests actually correlate among themselves very highly, and so he says that this correlation that they are having among themselves, because if there are different factors, if different intelligence tests measure different factors, then there should not be a correlation among themselves. But then since there is a correlation among themselves, then there has to be a unitary factor, there has to be a common factor which is causing this high correlations, and that is what he said is G. So, he says that G is that common factor which is the reason for high correlations among multiple intelligence tests. So, multiple intelligence tests, the high correlation among multiple intelligence tests represents that there is a G factor. So, that is what Spearman actually believes. And then there is the view of Thurston, who believes that intelligence is not just one specific factor, it is multiple factors. So, intelligence I is S1 plus S2 plus S3 plus S4, where S1 could be my verbal intelligence, this could be my linguistic intelligence, this could be my intelligence in music, or this could be intelligence in social skills, and so on and so forth. And so, that is the difference. So, Thurston idea and Spearman idea. Spearman believes that there is one intelligence factor which is called G, and based on that people can be compared, and then this G factor is what is responsible for or what is the reason for your intelligence, and there might be other some common S1, S2 specific factors which lead to intelligence. On the other hand, there is someone called Thurston who believes that no, it is not true. What happens is that there are multiple factors, and these multiple factors actually lead to the idea of intelligence. So, intelligence is composed of separate abilities that operate more or less independently, and that is what is Thurston's view. Thurston believes that intelligence is abilities, intelligence is composed of several abilities that operate independent of each other. So, it could be S1, for example, for verbal, S2 for your social skill, and so on and so forth, etc. So, different skills combine together to form your intelligence. Now, according to the multifaceted view, people can be high on some components of intelligence, but low on others. Now, if you look at the idea of what Spearman said, if you are high on G factor, then you will be high on other factors, because G is the one which is deciding your intelligence. But the multifaceted view has an interesting viewpoint. It says that it can be possible for people to be intelligent on some so for example, some abilities and low on other abilities. For example, look at academics. Now, if you look at academicians, they are very good at verbal skill, they are very good at arithmetic skill, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to social skill, they are very bad at at that. Look at the case of Albert Einstein, and so he was very bad at social skills, not a very good people, or for that matter look at any academician, they are not very good in social. So, very high on academic ability somehow predicts that you will be bad on social skills, and so this is what is feature which is tolerated by the multifaceted view, and it believes that intelligence, since it is composed of so many parts or so many systems combined together, one can be high on one component and low on other component. Thurston 1939 suggests that intelligence is composed of 7 distinct primary mental abilities like verbal, meaning, number and space. And so what Thurston says is, as I told you, that Thurston is one of the proponents of multiple intelligence theory. So he believes that intelligence is composed of 7 distinct primary types, one being the verbal meaning, the other being the number meaning, and then space, and so on and so forth. So, 7 different abilities, they combine together to form the idea of what is intelligence. So, then let us start looking at some of the theories of intelligence. Now, one of the most primary theory of intelligence is called the Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. And so, what Gardner said is that intelligence, he believes, or he is stuck with the idea that intelligence is basically a multifaceted view. Intelligence is a property which is composed of, or intelligence is a system which is composed of multiple components or multiple processes. And so, what Thurston believes is that mental processes underlie intelligent behavior. Now, what he says is that intelligent behavior, since it is defined by multiple processes or multiple mental processes, so these different processes actually signify different components or different abilities. And so, these different components or different processes actually combine together to form intelligence. So, people can be good on one factor and people could be bad on one factor, and that is tolerable or that is tolerable. So, he believes that there are 7 distinct types of intelligence that are independent of each other and operate in separate modules of the brain. What Thurston believes is that the brain has 7 different modules, and people may have some of the modules or may not have all the modules, and then people have 7 distinct type of intelligence. All these intelligence types are actually independent of each other, they are not dependent, and they can be functioning as a separate module, a separate developed module. And so, what he says is that any person may have all of these modules or may not have some of the modules, but one of the module has to be in most people. And so, he defines the 7 modules in terms of linguistic intelligence. So, the first type of intelligence that Thurston defines is called the linguistic intelligence. And so, what is linguistic intelligence? What Thurston says is that linguistic intelligence is that part of intelligence or that type of intelligence which actually make you good in terms of verbal vocabulary. You are able to speak well, you are able to talk well, you are able to comprehend sentences well, you are able to write well, read well, and that kind of a thing. So, very good in writing, very good in reading, and so women generally tend to be having very high linguistic abilities. So, how nicely can you write? How good you are in your grammar? Can you write complete sentences? Can you write perfect sentences? Can you talk effortlessly? Do you feel afraid while talking? Now, how fluent you are in your talking, and so that comprises of the linguistic ability. Then there is something called the musical intelligence. People with musical intelligence can find music anywhere. You might have seen friends of yours where they start drumming something, they start drumming a board and creating music out of it. So, people who can hear music from any external environment or for any external thing, or can see music in the world or can see music where it does not exist, or are so musical that they can actually find music in the environmental sounds. These people have musical intelligence. So, they are born with a very sharp ear and very sharp idea of what is music. Then there is a third type of intelligence which is called the logical and mathematical intelligence. Now, these people are the same people who are very logical. Talk to them, they will give you a reasoning for everything. They talk with logic. They are the same people, if you talk to them or if you give them any kind of explanation, they will be returning arguments in terms of logic. They use some kind of a logic, and these are the same people who are very good in mathematics. Give them any number, give them, they can play with numbers, they can represent anything in numbers, they can manipulate numbers, they can come up with equations and solve many problems using equations. They can use logic to predict uncertain environments. They can do all kind of things with numbers and with arguments and premises and draw conclusions out of it. And so, very good in terms of reasoning, in terms of providing arguments, providing correct arguments, or providing arguments of why should something be there and why should not be something there, and what kind of behavior is appropriate when, and so on and so forth. Then people good in spatial intelligence. You might have often seen people or friends of yours who actually never forget a space, which basically means that take them anywhere in the city or in your town, in any town, and show them the town once, they will never forget that town. And these people are known to be very good in spatial intelligence. What they do is they use something called the cognitive map, and so what they do is store these spaces in the brain in such a way that it is easier for them to go back into space, or they are very good with lefts and rights. Now, most of us have actual problems when we talk about left and right. So, sometimes we say left and we go right, and when we say right we go left. So, it is very difficult to understand space. Have you ever tried reading a map? It's quite difficult. It says you are here and then there is some definition, or when Google gives you some kind of, if you ever used maps, Google gives you some kind of a definition or some kind of an instruction. So, how good are you in following those instructions? I do remember one of my recent journeys when I was in Vienna, and so it actually, Google gave me some instructions, turn right from a particular signal and go roundabout, and what happened is I actually followed its path, and a place that was very near to me, very right next to me, I took a very long distance following Google and following incorrectly Google, rather I would say, to reach at the place. Whereas a friend of mine who was accompanying me, she could reach the place much faster than me because she had a good spatial intelligence. So, for me it was very difficult because I had to go about a roundabout and come to the place. On the other hand, a friend of mine who was traveling, she was very fast in reaching the place, because this idea of spatial intelligence, the idea of spaces, or the idea of how you make movements in spaces, that is what was good with her, and so she had a good spatial intelligence. Similarly, there is something called the bodily and kinesthetic intelligence. So, this is the same thing where people are able to know what their body wants, or how kinesthetic or what kind of function can be done, or how what kind of push you can give to the body. So, sports person have very good bodily intelligence. These people are aware of the fact that what can be achieved with their body, what can be achieved, or what can how they can pull to the body to the extreme. So, these are the same people who know their body well, who know how what to eat, what kind of work to do, how it to be done, and so on and so forth. So, with the body actions they are very good. Now, intrapersonal intelligence. Intrapersonal intelligence is whether you understand yourself. So, intrapersonal, right? Interpersonal is when we actually can talk to other people, or how intelligent we are when talking to others. But talking to the self, how good you are in knowing yourself. Do you know who you are? Do you know, can you read your bodily symptoms? Can you read what your body is wanting? Can you read what your mind is saying? So, how good you are, or how aware you are in knowing yourself and dealing with it and taking care of yourself is what is intrapersonal intelligence. How good you are in understanding yourself, that comprises the intrapersonal intelligence. And then there is something called the interpersonal intelligence, as I have defined. This is the ability to deal with other people, how good you are in dealing with other people. So, if there is a friend of yours who is asking for your help, how good you are in talking to him and deciding whether he needs help or not, or how good you are in understanding social situations and defining social situations and that kind of a thing. So, how good are you in doing these kind of things is what is the interpersonal intelligence. So, these are the definition: linguistic intelligence, this is the definition of linguistic intelligence, then musical intelligence, then logical and mathematical intelligence, then spatial intelligence, body kinesthetic intelligence, the ability to use all parts of the body to solve problems of fashion products, includes for example, fashion includes control over the finer and gross motor actions and the ability to manipulate external objects. And then we have the interpersonal intelligence that is distinguished among one's own feeling and intentions, and then there is intrapersonal intelligence. So, there is a good idea to go through this table. The next class of intelligence or the next definition of intelligence comes from the idea of the information processing theory. Now, we have dealt with information processing theory, and so what does information processing theory actually say is that there are stores and there are processes. So, these stores are where information is stored, and there are processes, active processes, which actually move objects from one store to another. Also, information processing theory suggests that there are 3 steps in information processing. The one step being encoding, where information is encoded in a particular manner, then it is stored somewhere at a storing system, and then it is retrieved. And these 3 processes combine together with the idea of how information or what kind of information is stored and how they are moved from one store to another within the store. So, the idea that how information moves within the store and how information is encoded and retrieved, this is what is the basic of information processing theory. And so, Anderson's theory is actually an extension of what is the information processing theory. So, Anderson's theory of intelligence and cognitive development. What does Anderson believe? Paul Anderson believe what is intelligence. Now, what Anderson believes is that the differences in intelligence released from differences in the basic processing mechanism that implement thinking, which in turn yields knowledge. So, basically what Anderson believes is, and so why I am doing this or detailing this is that Anderson believes that intelligence is a 2-part process. There are 2 types of intelligence, 2-part intelligence. One is called intelligence through the basic processing mechanisms, and the other is called module based intelligence. Now, this basic processing mechanism is composed of 2 different processes, the spatial process and the propositional process, and within the module. And so, intelligence is what Anderson believes is intelligence is this part, and this part is not generally called as intelligence. So, what Anderson believes is that intelligence is how easily or how fast can you take in an information and operate onto it, how quick you are in taking in information, understanding an information and operating with it. The basic processing mechanisms of understanding any problem. Take it any examination, for example, take the JEE or GMAT or SAT. The idea here is that it is a time bound test, it is a 3-hour test or the test that you will be taking after this course. Now, this is a 3-hour test, and so it depends upon how quickly you can actually see a question, not only see the question, relate it from where this which section or which chapter it is coming from, and not only that, can find out what are the possible options which have been given, and then can recognize which of the answer is correct and which of the answer is not correct. Now, the problem with multiple choice questions is that there are 4 answers, right, and all of these answers compete with each other. One good thing about multiple choice questions is that there is always a possibility of 25% chance that you are correct, but given the fact that if you do not have negative markings, there is always a 25% chance that you will be right, because one of the answers is correct, right. But the task here is to recognize, to find out which of the answers is correct, because all of them are competing. If the answers, questions have been made in a good way, all of the answers work is competing. So, your job in a test like a 3-hour test is basically dependent on the basic processing mechanism. How quickly can you see the question? Not only how quickly can you see the question, can you find the relevant part of the question. A question may have so many things, right, but what is the relevant part? What is the part that is actually of use? Can you pick that out? Once you can pick that out, can you actually use that part and find out an answer? Found out from where in the text this question is coming from, and then find out all the possible answers, and then be confident about what answers you have looked at. That is called the basic processing mechanism, and that comprises of 2 things. Basic processing mechanism comprises of something called propositional system and the spatial system. In propositional systems, the systems actually look at what kind of logic has been given, what kind of arguments, what kind of statement has been given, and can this statement be verified or not, and that kind of problems. The other is spatial. So, looking at spaces, looking at diagrams, looking at certain two or three dimensional areas, how quickly can you navigate from one place to another, how quickly mentally you can navigate. So, questions like if somebody starts from point A, goes 6 km here to the left, 3 km to the right, then turns around to the right, left, and that kind of a thing, and how far is it, that kind of questions are spatial questions. So, can you actually mentally rotate yourself in certain ways, do spatial manipulations and come up with answers. And so, if you can, then, and if you can do that fast, because it's 3 hours test. So, the more faster you can solve problems like that, the better you are in terms of basic processing mechanism, and the better your intelligence is. In addition to this, what Anderson believes is there is something called module based intelligence. And what is module based intelligence? There are certain type of intelligence. So, given the fact that if most people are given enough time, they will be able to solve the question that you have solved. The reason being that they are not able to solve it time based, they are slow. Now, certain kind of intelligence, for example, intelligence in terms of emotionality, intelligence in terms of spirituality, how spiritually intelligent you are, how emotionally intelligent you are, or whether you are honest person. So, honesty intelligence based on intelligence. These factors are not very fast. Honesty does not develop very fast, and so for honesty to develop, it requires some time. And so, these properties or these factors are dependent on certain modules in the brain, and it develops over a period of time. Honesty does not develop very quickly. If I give you a question and you solve it, and you won't be honest, but you would be very good and quick in terms of dealing with mathematical properties, but not in terms of honesty, not in terms of empathy, and these kind of factors, or emotionality or spirituality. These things are something which develop over a period of time, and they develop using something called module, or they develop as a module. And so, most people have module based intelligence, which is these kind of things, for example, spirituality or emotionality for that matter. All these factors are module dependent, and they develop over a period of time. So, intelligence, according to Anderson, is composed of this basic processing mechanism, but then there is another kind of intelligence which is called module based intelligence, and people do not actually work on that. So, what Anderson believes is that differences in intelligence between people results from differences in the basic processing mechanism that we were talking about, that implements thinking, which in turn yields to knowledge. So, how quickly can you think, how quickly you can do propositional manipulations and spatial manipulations and come up with the answer. Now, what Anderson believes is that there are two different routes to knowledge. So, knowledge is basically composed of two routes. The first involving the basic processing mechanisms which operate through specific processes to acquire knowledge. As I said, the basic processing mechanisms uses both the propositional process as well as the spatial process. Now, the second route involves the use of modules to acquire knowledge. As I said, this is time dependent, develops with age, and so intelligence can also be module dependent, which comes automatically if module has matured enough. So, certain modules, for example, the idea that how honest you are, the idea that how emotional you are, or how spiritual you are, they develop with time and they mature with time, and so people are not compared, generally people are not compared on that particular intelligence type. A third theory of intelligence is basically called Sternberg's theory of intelligence. It is called the triarchic theory, and the theory has 3 sub theories. The idea that intelligence is not just the basic processing mechanism, or whether it is just 3 systems interacting with each other. Sternberg believes that there are 3 types of intelligence, or 3 sub theories. For example, one is called the componential subtype of intelligence, which involves the ability to think critically and analytically. Can we think critically? Can we solve problems quickly? Can we read our own feedbacks? How quickly can we solve problems? How quickly can we read our own feedbacks? How quickly can we do certain jobs? For example, if we are planning dinner for people, let us say I invite some friends to my home for dinner. Now, for that purpose, for achieving this dinner, I have to know certain facts, and I have to calculate certain facts. So, how good I am in calculation? How much food should I make? How much food do I believe somebody will eat? What should I order? What is the environment? So, can I plan ahead in time? Can I plan of what kind of food I will be ordering? Can I do this kind of all this? And so, that kind of thing is called componential intelligence or sub-theory, where the abilities to think critically and analytically is the core of it. Then there is something called the experiential subtheory. The experiential theory emphasizes insights and the idea to formulate new ideas. Experiential sub-theory basically says that intelligence, some type of intelligence are experiential in nature. It comes with experience. For example, look at Einstein and Newton. These people had intelligence of the experiential type. With experience, the intelligence developed. Einstein was a clerk, and so if he had no experience or if he had not involved in the kind of work that he was doing, he couldn't have been intelligent. Assuming that Einstein became a clerk all his life and never studied physics, would he have gave a theory of relativity? So this kind of intelligence says that the more experience you have with a particular domain or a particular field or a particular science, the higher intelligent you would be, and so this is called the experiential idea of intelligence. And then there is something called the contextual subtheory. The contextual subtheory says that certain kind of intelligence is dependent on the context. Now, people high on these dimensions are intelligent in practical and adaptive sense. They are what many people call street smart and adapt to solve everyday problems. Let us say that you go in a train and so you lose your ticket. Now, very high intelligent people who are very high intelligent or people who have done highly intelligent things, they will freeze. They do not know how to deal with no ticket situation. Now, assuming that you do not want to spend too much money and the ticket is very expensive. So, how to deal out with a situation like that, right? So, highly intelligent people do not actually know, they are very stupid, they get caught, and so how to come up with a situation like that. Or if you are in a situation which requires your ability to deal with people, to deal with social skills. So, if you are very good in logical or mathematical intelligence or verbal intelligence, you may never get out of the situation like this. So, how to use people, how to manipulate people, how to manipulate situations and environments, how to adapt to the situation and environment and get out of a situation like this is what is called contextual intelligence. And some people have this intelligence which is being called as the street smart intelligence, and so it depends upon context. It depends upon what context it is you are coming from, what kind of situation you have been coming from, and depending on the context can you actually change. So, most highly developed is componential subtheory, which includes meta components of performance components and knowledge and acquisition based components. So, let us look at the component of the triarchic theory. The triarchic theory says that there is something called componential and subtheory, where how you think and act analytically is what it is. So, it has certain meta components, for example, performance. Now, as I said, inviting someone for a dinner party, you have to think critically and analyze similarly to do this party, and so the meta component is performance. How good you are in performing, how good performance do you have. So, how good you are in doing things like acquiring in much needed information for cooking the dinner for everyone. The knowledge, how quickly can you store knowledge, how quickly can you store ideas about who can eat what and who cannot eat what, and that kind of a thing. And then acquisition, where when you have this knowledge of somebody is veg, somebody is non-veg, how many people eat what, and so can you do that, can you do a feedback thing kind of a thing, can you monitor your performance, can you change. So, if enough food is there, can you get dispersed of it, if less food is there, how do you take care of situations like that, and that is what is the componential theory, and these are the meta components of it. Similarly, the experiential subtheory has two components on novelty and automation. For example, in the exponential theory, where experience makes you become intelligence, novelty is a good part. So, how novel you are in your approach and how automatic you are to common day problems, that will define your experiential intelligence, because the more experience you are with a particular field or a particular field of research or a particular field of expertise, you will become, the more automated you will become, simpler problems will become automatic, and so your solutions will be novel. Whereas, for common people, they will be only attached to simple problems. Similarly, contextual subtheory has three parts: adaptation, selection and shaping. Now, contextual subtheory has parts like how quickly you are able to adapt to situations. Not only that, how quickly are you selecting those situations or those contexts which actually are beneficial for you, so it is rewarding for you and not giving you any kind of problem. And the third is shaping. Can you shape situations according to you so that you have maximum gain and minimum loss? The fourth kind of theory is called the Cattell's theory of fluid and crystallized intelligence, and so this is a very simple theory. So, this theory is based on statistical technique of factor analysis. So, let us first see what factor analysis is very simply. So, in factor analysis what we do is a lot of data is there. So, a lot of data is pulled together, and so meaning is interpreted out of that data. So, how do we do that? What we actually do is that we find commonalities. So, if we have 1,000 of data and we do not know how to interpret it, the best way is to find commonalities or correlations between them. And factor analysis is basically a technique of finding how much data points correlate amongst themselves. So, if a lot of data points correlate among themselves and form clear cut groups, then these groups are called the factors, and this is what is factor analysis. So, this theory is based on factor analysis. Now, Cattell 1963 concluded that there are two major clusters of mental abilities, which is called the fluid and crystallized intelligence. So, what Cattell says is there are two types of intelligence, the fluid type and the crystallized type. Now, what is fluid intelligence? It refers largely to inherent abilities and to think and reason, in a sense, the hardware of a brain that determines the limits of our information processing. So, basically fluid intelligence is that which is innate, is largely inherited ability of thinking and reasoning, and this is this kind of ability is hardwired to our brain, and it is also dependent on certain abilities. So, how quickly can you read will depend upon how your eyesight is, or how nicely can you find things is dependent on your ability to see. Also, how quickly can you hear something will depend upon your ability of hearing, and so that kind of a thing. So, small children will not be able to process large complex problems, and so that is also dependent on the brain ability. Now, in opposition to that, there is something called crystallized intelligence, which refers to the accumulated knowledge, information we store over a lifetime of experience plus the application of skills and knowledge. So, this is that intelligence or those factors, those kind of abilities that we actually learn through our experience. Now, there are examples of it. The speed with which one can analyze information is an example of fluid intelligence, and the breadth of one's vocabulary is crystallized intelligence. As you know, analysis of information is dependent on how developed your brain is, how basic areas of a brain has developed, and vocabulary, which is something that you learn when you start learning language, is what is called the crystallized intelligence. And so, the last theory in this section is called the CC's biological theory. So, it's a very basic theory, and what it says is that everyday intellectual performance cannot only be explained by IQs or biological notions of general intelligence. So, what it says is that CC says that intelligence is not only just general intelligence or biological factors, inherited factors looking at intelligence, but the environment has a lot of role to play. So, rather than intellectual performance depends on interaction between multiple cognitive potentials with a rich, well organized knowledge base. So, intelligence performance depends on interactions between cognitive potentials with well organized knowledge base. So, how good knowledge you have, how much good knowledge you have, and how much good potentials or abilities that you have, good processing ability, visual processing ability with good knowledge base can actually be what is intelligence. And this highlights the impact of environment on IQ. More the environmental risk child exposed to, lower the IQ. And so, this theory says that the environment has a lot of role to play. So, not only your cognitive abilities, but the rich base that you have, that will combine together to form your intelligence, and this rich base actually comes from well organized knowledge base actually comes from environment. So, if you are in a very promising environment, you will actually turn out to be very good, and if you are in a very deprived environment, you will actually turn out to be a stupid person or maybe not so intelligent person. So, I'll stop my lecture here today, and we'll try and do a review of what we did in this today's lecture. So, what we did in today's lecture is we looked at another interesting factor which is called intelligence, a cognitive factor which is called intelligence, and that decides our behaviors to external stimuli or external world. Now, we looked at what is the definition of intelligence and how intelligence is basically looked at as a unitary system, as a multifaceted system, how they combine together. So, that is what we did. Other than that, we looked at certain theories of intelligence. So, starting with the idea of Gardner's theory to the idea of the Anderson's theory and Sternberg's theory and the idea of CC's theory and Cattell's theory. So, we looked at 5 different intelligence theories and what they think of intelligence and what comprises of it and how it moves and that kind of a thing. So, how is intelligence important, what are the parts of intelligence, factors affecting intelligence, that is what we did in today's lecture. So, when we meet next, we will be continuing with looking at how intelligence tests are defined or designed and what is the neural and cognitive basis of intelligence. Further on, we will look at some intelligence tests and give you a viewpoint of what intelligence tests actually measured, and then we will take a model system which is emotional intelligence and see whether that model system fits with the idea of intelligence. So, up till we meet the next time, it is bye from the studios of MOOCs. Bye.